everyone, welcome back to Bookish. I'm Lonnie.
I'm John.
Are you John?
I am John. I may not look like Melissa. Unfortunately, Melissa is not here. She is over in Scotland studying abroad, so for the next couple of episodes, I will be filling in for her.
Season 2 started off with a Melissa impersonator.
I know.
But today we have an exciting episode. So we have a very special guest. Special guest, do you want to introduce yourself?
What do I even say? Okay, hi, I'm Nadaa, and I'm a former MFA student.
Yeah.
Well, I got former, wow, real, okay. So I'm Nadaa, I'm a former MFA student who studied poetry, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the MFA process, how to apply, how to get it in, how it's really like, all the way down through graduation.
Yeah. Thank you. We wanted Nadaa for a really long time. Nadaa and I met when she was my TA in post-colonial lit. That was origin stories. Okay, the beginning of this interview. So, what got you into pursuing an MFA in the first place? What are your interests creatively or even academically? And kind of what was your specialty? What was your focus specifically?
Mm-hmm. So I actually never really planned on doing an MFA. I used to write a lot when I was younger, in middle school and high school, and then I went to undergrad and took a break. Did something completely different. I got my degree in political science and international relations, and I was like, I'm just going to be a #boss babe and go work in politics. And then in my last quarter in undergrad, I had to take some electives. I ended up taking a creative writing class called Hybrids and Experiments, which was all about hybridization and experimentation in creative writing and all the new forms and genres that were coming out. And I really liked that professor in that class so much that got me back into writing. And she's like, you should, consider going to get an MFA. And I'm like, no, you're so crazy. I just finished this degree. Let me, go do politics. But after I graduated, this is, the job market was terrible. This is, right after COVID. Every single, political science job or anything was, we're going to pay you, poverty wages. You're going to get, $20K a year at max. You're going to be working, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And on top of that, you live in a shoebox. Good luck. And, rent is, $500 and just enjoy suffering. So it's just, I don't want to do this. And every single person in their mid-20s who doesn't know what to do, I was like, oh my God, let me go get another degree. Kidding. There's actually reasons to get an MFA. But part of it, I was like, okay, if I really don't want to do politics, I don't want to do an MPA, what do I want to do? And I felt during this entire time, the only thing I had really enjoyed in the past year was that writing class. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to apply for an MFA and see what happens. And then if I get in, I'll go do it. But this is really the only thing that's interesting or engaging to me. And I always told myself, I'm like, okay, sorry to all the people who are in their 10th year of their PhD. I was like, if I want to get another degree and get a PhD, I have to be done by the time I'm 32. So I need to get an MFA in my mid-20s so I can decide if I want to pivot and do a PhD in another field. And now I'm happy with creative writing. So my thing, I was like, this is the perfect timing to try something new. If I hate it, I can still go get another degree and have a PhD and be a professor before 35 and be safe. And nobody will get at me for being too old and spending too much time in school. So it's sort of what led me to an MFA, and I feel like I don't mean to make it come across as lightly. I think it's a big deal and a big decision as well. But I also think that the way that people now see academia or even going to go get a degree is we see it more as okay, we need to do this to get a piece of paper so we can go get money. It's become high school light or high school 2.0. So a lot of people don't really take it as an opportunity for learning and engaging and learning something new. And I figured the worst thing is I'll be in debt, but ideally I won't be. Graduated with no debt from this MFA program, thank God. But I was like, if I can get into just a fully funded program, I want to learn more about writing, might as well have an MFA and see if this is the right fit for me. And I think that's a bit of an unconventional perspective. People usually go get an MFA because they're okay, I want to get a book, I want to publish, I want to move on to the next phase in my career of writing life. So I think I was a little bit naive going into it. But I do think my blind optimism being okay, I'll just learn about if I like this or not was sort of worth it because I wouldn't have just taken the leap without it. And that's why I sort of encourage anyone to go get an MFA in a way. If you feel you can write and you're a good writer and you have people around you, just apply and see what happens, especially if you like it. And I guess that's another proponent of what really made me apply for an MFA is when I also was trying to figure out, okay, existential crisis, what do I do with my life now that I have this political science degree?
Love that.
I would always go to this one bookstore, and there's this dude there who would write poems on a typewriter, which is entirely funny because we did a typewriting poetry event like when I graduated here, so sort of like brought it full circle. And he was like, oh, you should go to this poetry group that's at this coffee shop. And I just showed up, and people would go every Sunday, and they would do like writing workshops from 3 to 5. So I just started going every week, and that sort of also solidified to me my desire to get an MFA because I was like, this is really fun, but I want more. Like I actually want to do more writing workshops. I want to learn about writing. And it's like community ran, so I think there's like a limit on how far that can go. So it was a really long answer, but that's what led me to get my MFA. And I think my focus has always been on poetry and hybridity. Specifically, I was really inspired by A. Van Jordan's Magnolia, which is like, he retells the story of Magnolia Cox from A to Z, starting with her death to like her birth. And every single page, he uses like different poetic forms. He does like dictionary poems, like all types of things. And there's like dictionary poems, ghazals, like everything. Like the whole gambit, really, I guess, from A to Z, because that's the theme. And I was like, wow, there's so much you can actually do more with poetry than like what we're taught or what we believe in. And that's also part, I guess, of the reason why I want to do the MFA is to sort of expand my beliefs. There's only so much you can understand about poetry, I think, from like a non-academic standpoint, especially if it's anything new or innovative. I also feel like people really are like, okay, like poetry, what are we doing? Like Dr. Seuss. I'm like, no, guys, there's things there outside of Shakespeare, outside of Dr. Seuss, outside of rhyming. There's like so much you can do within the space of it. I hope that answered the question.
No, that's awesome.
That's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, we like to talk a lot about like, because like students watch this, hopefully.
I hope so.
Like professors watch this, and we just like hearing kind of about like the realities of academia, because I think it is like, for me, for someone who like also had no idea going in, like I'm like from like I'm like first gen college, you know? So going into academia, especially in the arts too, it's like, it really has affected the way I see graduate school, the way I see opportunity, and the way I see like passion versus opportunity. So I totally get kind of that idea of like, I was kind of naive going into it. I'm like new, it was like a new frontier.
Yeah.
And yeah, but like I want to ask, do you have anything to say, John? Sorry.
No, I was going to ask, like, coming out of the MFA program now, I know you said you were going in to like discover more about writing and more about poetry. I'm curious as to what you sort of found out coming out, and versus what you thought going in, you know, like how did the MFA program inform your writing?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm like, oh, that's something I've tried to figure out. But I guess I also want to touch on what you said about like being a first-gen student and not really knowing. I think it's also funny because I think that like there is this like attachment, like grad school being this big thing, and the reason I was just like whatever about it is also a little bit of like privilege plus naivety, because my dad is a college professor, and so he's always been a professor, so I've been like always in that atmosphere. So for me it was like a guarantee that I had to go to undergrad. So like grad school is something that they're like, oh yeah, you probably will do. So for me, I'm like, since I'd already known about grad school, and my father teaches at a graduate school, teaches at medical school, and my siblings had all went to grad school. I think for me it was like less scary, and then also I was able to take it more lightly because there's like a lot of things people don't know. Like for example, like at least in the United States, if you're doing an MFA or PhD, to anyone here who's an undergrad who's listening, do not go to a program that doesn't fund you. That's something people don't know. So for me with an MFA, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go to an MFA that doesn't fund me, so it's worth taking this risk. But also like I was able to just like jump into, like, I did have thought behind it, but I was able to, like, jump into a degree program and start it without worrying about, like, what I would do next or if this would completely ruin my life because of that. And, like, the realization I can pivot. And that's something I also want to tell a lot of students that, like, one, do it because you want to learn, and don't ever take anything as seriously as people tell you to, which I know sounds like terrible advice, but it's like you can go into a program, change your mind, and then alter it. Just like only go into programs that pay you, be honest with yourself and your intentions, and I think it can go well. And I guess like on top of that too, especially for first-gen students, like really ask for like, school's supposed to be for you. You're not supposed to be for it. If that is a weird thing to say, I think people try to make themselves fit the university or what they want to do, or like, okay, like I'm going to go become a doctor because of this. But it's there for you to do for fun. It's not like a checklist. Do it because it fits you and it suits you and your interests and what you want to do, and pursue that, or you're just going to be bored and burnt out. But that's a little bit off topic, but I was like, I just sort of want to include that because I think people take grad school like a little too seriously. And never go in debt. Never go in debt for a graduate degree.
Yeah.
Love yourself. Don't do it. Just collect the undergrad debt and run.
It's like you can talk so much about like the love of writing and the love of being a student, but like, you know, we're all real people living with like real things that we have to worry about. So I like that advice.
Thank you. Because I love being a student. I love writing, but I don't love
be
living in poverty and suffering.
it.
Yeah, be strategic. Yeah. It's like, I'm supposed to be like suffering writer, suffering academic stereotype. Like, come on, like, go outside, get some vitamin D.
Yeah.
Like be happy.
Be smart about your decisions, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that's the advice I got from a lot of my professors. Like, yeah, like, I totally get, like, the idea of, like, you loving things, you just wanting to try. But, like, there's ways that you can do that.
Yeah.
While still also not putting yourself in like a precarious kind of situation.
Exactly. So that's why I was like, I definitely jumped into things without seeing. You can do it and survive, but like take my warning and also dream a little bit bigger. But I guess what I would say that when I got into this program, what I took from it, I had liked my MFA, but I guess in many ways, going I think from political science to creative writing, I just I feel like with political science, it's like the way you approach writing and rhetoric is completely different. And I thought in creative writing, like, yes, it'd be more creative based, but when I was like coming sort of from the background, thinking of everything through like political theory and that lens, I was like, okay, you can analyze the shit out of creative writing, which is like fun, but you have to sort of like not change your mindset on that. But I felt like when I came to my MFA program, I wanted to sort of figure out like how to marry like sort of like the political side of writing and the poetic side of it. And speaking about like in the post-colonial literature class, you know, like we read like I think like Césaire Discourse on Colonialism, and a lot of that old post-colonial work was like very poetic.
Yeah. Like
the way it's written, the styles, the like musings about life and human nature. So coming from that background, I was like, how can I take this and take poetry and make it into something interesting? And I think that like my project ended up changing a lot while I'm here because that's just like the nature of the program. But I think like starting this MFA and leaving this MFA, I think I learned a lot more, I guess, not necessarily to be like realistic, but a lot more about it was like taking what you already have, honing it, and then learning like the craft skills behind it. Because it's like you could write a poem, but like oftentimes you can't break down like, okay, how and why did I actually write this poem? And I think that's something that really helped with like at least workshop and craft classes. I wish we had more time to take more seminars. I really enjoyed seminars, but I felt like I just ended up coming out with a deeper knowledge of like the canon, like what people are reading, like the history of writing, and the craft elements in history, like I guess behind it, which I know sounds like very like I guess like a very like lame, very dull answer, but I think that's really the most of it.
It's not dull. Yeah.
I will say like I'm such a nerd. I'm like I sort of want to go back to a PhD just because I'm like okay I'm like not done reading actually. Let me go back to like you know the 12th century. Like I want to start reading some like ancient Chinese poetry. Let me get to like Babylonian epics. I feel like there's just so much and you have so little time. So I feel like I came out with like a widened knowledge, but I also will say that I feel like when I finished my MFA, I felt like I wasn't done. But that's because to me it just showed me so many other avenues I can go explore. And I think the issue with an MFA is it's a terminal degree in creative writing. So if you're going to do anything next, you have to get a PhD. And usually with those, you have to like do something specific. Like, so I'm like, I really don't want to like just do specific like Shakespearean poetry. Like, what do I do next? Yeah. There are some new, like I think USC now has like a creative writing PhD. Yeah. But I found myself actually coming out of my MFA, like being like, okay, this is not enough. I have like 30 billion unread books. What do I do now? And the answer for that a lot is like applying for residencies and conferences and workshops, sort of like get that feeling back. But I guess I will say like if you're gonna go into an MFA, it's not gonna like solve everything or change everything or all your questions. You're probably actually gonna leave with more questions than when you started. Like you'll leave a better writer, you'll leave with more experience. I think what's the most important thing for me from this program is I left with a lot more teaching experience, more of a want to be a teacher. But I still do feel like my like quest for knowledge isn't over because you really just realize like that there's like no limits. Like there's so many poetry books that come out day by day. Like I find myself like literally going in every single bookstore. I'm like, why am I buying like 5 poetry books when I have like 20 unread ones or novels or even short stories? And something I like about Davis is they let you take workshops out of your genre. And I was like, okay, you know, like maybe I'll like, you know, do some fiction. And fiction ended up not being my thing. And I'm like, okay, I love poetry, creative nonfiction, essays. And I'm like, how did I get here? Like I wanted to do poetry and hybrid poetry, but now I'm like, maybe I'm an essayist actually. Maybe I should be writing essays. So I think like from coming in here, I was really idealistic. I thought I'd be like thinking about poetry and writing more experimental poetry. And at the end, I think I came out with just a strong love for poetry, but now suddenly like an interest in essays and essayists and all these other skills and more of a focus on wanting to be a teacher than I thought I would. So really just like a lot more interests I want to like go into. I don't know if that makes sense or if you have a follow-up question.
No, I think it's interesting how you said like going into the MFA program, I think a lot of students have this preconception that going into any graduate program, they'll come out sort of like satisfied.
Yeah,
and
like settled.
Yeah, settled. But I think the point of an MFA program, any graduate program, is to come out with more questions. I think that
Exactly.
I think it's there to promote like a love of learning and it's giving you the tools on how to learn and how to extend that. So I think it's really cool how you touched on that. And I think it's an important.
I think it's a good sign that you were just like, no, I'm not satisfied.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's like a really good thing to not come out and be like, so I learned everything I need to
Yeah.
learn.
Exactly. If I learned everything, I was like, I learned everything, I'm done, I'm perfect now. Yeah, I'd be delusional because I feel like there's just so much to learn about writing. And okay, no offense to people who do finish it, like, okay, I'm done. Not saying you're delusional, but it's like, I just think for me, it's hard to find maybe that like satisfaction because so many books come out like year by year. So I feel like with it like an MFA, like you might come out and you might be like, okay, I'm satisfied with the amount of knowledge I've like gained, which I am satisfied. Like I think with this program, I'm satisfied with the amount of knowledge I gained, but it hasn't stopped me from not wanting to gain more knowledge. If there was an exhaustive MFA program, it'd be like 10 years. And it would never end. Every year there'd be another year tacked on because you'd have to read the 30 new books that came out that year. And you'd be like never ending. Also, pro tip, anyone just get a Kindle Unlimited account if you're going to start grad school.
That's good.
Just get a Kindle Unlimited account to save money, like that little segue. This is not an ad; they don't fund me, but just get one of those. So you can save money on all the books you want to buy and read for class.
Yeah, that's
Kindle,
a good tip.
if you want to sponsor us.
Kindle.
Actually, yeah, sponsor us.
If they don't sponsor us, like block it out, so like they can't even tell we're saying Kindle. They don't even deserve the like name shout out. Give these students $20 per episode.
Student discount. No, I totally agree though. Like, I feel like it's that addicting feeling of like, wait, I'm like not done, and like time has passed by way quicker than I thought. That people who are considering graduate school feel like undergrad. Like I'm at the cusp of, we're at the cusp of undergrad. Me, John, and Melissa, and all our friends. And I feel like it's that exciting cusp of like, what do I want to do more of? Like, what have I been unsatisfied with the amount of time I've been spending? For some people, it's like business and it's like working, but like for some people I think it's like genuinely learning. And I think that's so exciting to hear. I don't know, it gives me hope as like someone who wants to do possibly an MFA. Like it's really exciting to hear about that process. But I did want to ask you, like, so you talked a lot about kind of the MFA itself, but like what got you specifically into creative writing? How did that grow as you got more serious about it? You know, if your dad was a professor and then your siblings were also in that kind of realm, did that affect it? And then how is that kind of carried off, I guess, now, where you are now?
Yeah. I think, part of it is definitely like my dad being a professor affected it. My mom also used to be a librarian for a little bit when I was a kid, so I think that's part of it. So they would just like, if I wasn't feeling well, she'd just take me with her to work and be like, okay, like here's the coloring book, I'll hide in the stacks, like see you in a couple hours. So I was like a library kid growing up, way too much. And I had a lot of older siblings, but we have like a large age gap, so they're like, you know, out doing whatever as the kids. It's like, okay, like yay, time to go to the library. So I spent like so much of my childhood, majority of my weekends, like every Saturday I'd be in the library for like 6 hours. And I'd be like, okay, let's go pick up one book. And it's like 7 hours later, and he's like, where are you? Where have you gone? Where did you go? So I think like growing up as a library kid a lot made me like to write. I didn't really even start writing until maybe I was like 13, 14. But I remember like going into middle school and being in 7th grade and being so excited because I got into like the creative writing elective. And I was like, finally, like I can write. I think it was just because I read so much of my love of reading that I was like, okay, I want to try this. So really just shout out to my dad for being a professor, my mom for working at a library during my formative years, because I really was just surrounded by books and there wasn't much else for me to do. And my parents are still technologically inept. Like, whenever I tell people, I'm like, we did not have a single video game console. Like, I played Mario Kart for like the first time in college. And people were like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. Ask my parents. We didn't have anything. I was like, what the fuck is a Nintendo Switch? Like, I literally had played Wii once at my friend's house. It was just like not having technology.
That's okay.
And living in the Stone Age. But I was like, what's a TV? There's books here. Just read one of them. And I'm like, a medical textbook, that's so fun. But I think I just was surrounded so much by reading and books, and I really like highly suggest people read to their kids. And even if you don't read to your kid, give your kid a book. They can figure it out. They can do some sight words, look at the pictures. Yeah, I'm kidding. But actually, please read to your children. A lot of people don't read to their children. So I think it was just being surrounded by books as a kid made me interested in it. And I remember like by the time I was in middle school at my local library, I had finished like everything in the child section. Was like halfway through like the teenage young adult section. I was like so bored. I was like, can you guys free me? Can I get like another library? Yeah. And I think because I was literally running out of things to read, because I like come from a small town Florida. The library actually was not that big, so I was like running out of things to read. What do I do? And I'm like, make my own. So I started writing. I also started getting on Tumblr, because it was definitely like that time for Tumblr was really popular. So it's like I was like, this is like end of middle school, going to high school. I'm like, I'm running out of books to read. I just got a computer. Let me go online. Oh my God, Tumblr, ebooks, Tumblr. And I just started writing because of that. Because everyone on Tumblr, like the reading space in Tumblr, people blog about books. It's also like there's no demarcation. A lot of people talk about writing. So I think that and taking like one creative writing class in 7th grade made me really inspired to start. Right, it did it in.
The nail in the coffin.
Exactly. Because I'm like, nail in the coffin. I'm like, sorry, fanfic.net, this was you.
Like Wattpad.
Yeah. I didn't even read any. This is like, I was like, wow, as a fan fiction fan, I didn't even write any fan fiction. But I was just like, I have no more books to read. These books should be continued. Let me go read other people's continuations. No. Let me find other things to read. And I was like, wait, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could dabble a little.
That's so real.
But I started writing fiction. I was like, absolutely, this is not for me. I was like, I can't do this. What is a plot point? What is sticking to something? You mean I have to explain every single thing I want to say? And I know a lot of people are like, oh, poets are just like, lazy fiction writers. We're not. It's different. It's a different ballpark.
No one
but I could never
that.
do fiction.
No one says
Maybe
that,
it's just me. But I think poetry's like, I think it's so fun. They bettered up, but I see it in my head.
I find poetry like one of the hardest things.
Which is interesting because I don't know, people find poetry really hard, but I found fiction so hard as a kid because I was like, you guys are making these wonderful stories. I want to write this. But I think for me, even learning like how to build stories and storytelling, it's like I think the creating an entire world and having to fill it in so much detail is like really remarkable and a lot of work. And I feel like with poetry, I don't know, it's not necessarily like the lack of detail, but poetry itself is a different beast, and I think it's all about how much can you say with, like, not even the most minimal words, but how much can you say in abstract, and that's what I really like about it. I feel like in fiction you have to, in a way, be true to the world. I always tell my, like, this is funny as someone who also taught fiction but, like, doesn't write fiction. I always tell my students, I'm like, they have to believe you. This can't seem like a lie. Like, a lot of fiction is, like, you have to make it in a way, and I've been realistic if you're writing a fantasy world, but you can't, if you're going to do world building in, like, a fiction world, like, one, you can't, like, necessarily contradict yourself. You have to create a world and a set of requirements, and if you're going to contradict yourself, it has to have meaning. So fiction has to be planned out. Like, you're creating an entire world from scratch, having people buy into it and create your own reality and truth. And, like, maybe I just never was that good of a liar. Maybe that's it. Like, maybe I need to get better at lying to be a fiction writer. But I think being a good fiction writer is, like, you have to lie. If your readers don't believe you, the story isn't going to be good. And I think I end up going to poetry because I think poetry is more murky and ambiguous. They don't have to believe your story, but they have to believe your emotions and your intent for a majority of the time.
I like that.
Yeah.
We're going to get someone who writes fiction, and I'm going to ask them the exact same thing.
And they're going to be like, no, it's completely wrong, actually.
No,
fiction is all
so
about truth-telling. But, like,
is fiction the one genre you don't want to cross over? Because nonfiction and poetry, I feel like, are so crossovers. Like,
yeah, they're so crossovers.
Those I feel like are almost like the same thing to me sometimes. But, like, is fiction where you draw the line?
I don't think it's necessarily where I draw the line. Like, maybe it will be a frontier for me in the future. I just think that, like, I haven't found necessarily a story I want to tell. I think also a lot of the ways people use fiction is a lot of people use, like, you think about, like, Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower, they use fiction in a way to tell, fiction isn't always about telling a story or a message, but usually within fiction itself, it's like there's something you want to convey or an experience you want to convey to someone, and through that, like, you have to have them be immersed in the experience and sort of, like, pull back the layers, right? And I think for me, there's just nothing that I have thought of that has compelled me enough to write it in, like, a fiction format, because it's, like, parallel to real life, because I think real life can be overwhelming. So a lot of fiction books, anyway, it's not that shy away from it, but they show us versions of realities we might not be seeing. And I think maybe for me, there's nothing that has compelled me to sit down and write a long project like that. Like, I have ideas, but nothing that's, like, forcing me to get up and be like, okay, like, let me get over my fear of fiction. And especially when I read, like, other short stories, like Jamil John Kochai, his Haunting of Hadri Hoteg. I love that book so much, this collection of short stories, and I'm like, yeah, I can't top this. And it's not even about topping it, it's that I just don't think that there's anything that has, like, compelled me to sit down and write, like, so many long pieces all together, like, about this topic. Like, every story in there I feel like is, like, so intentional and connected. Maybe it's just something, like, I'll want to do in the future. Maybe it's, like, a writing level up thing, but I think, I don't know, to like write fiction, there has to be like, you really, really have to want to do it. And you really have to be, there really has to be stories you want to tell. And I feel like for me, poetry and creative nonfiction, in a way, convey the stories I want to tell. And I think also maybe as a kid, I just read so much fiction, I really used it as escapism, that for me, poetry and creative nonfiction is the opposite of that, right? Because I spent so much time escaping into other people's stories. I don't necessarily want to write other stories of mine for other people to escape in, because I'm trying to stop escaping and like more like write things that are grounded in reality. So like maybe give me like 5 years, and once I write all my like nonfiction, I'll be like, okay, I'm ready for fiction. I have a story I want to tell now.
It's
that is
coming.
not
It'll
in
come.
real life. It'll come. I'm like if we survive until like me always drip at I'm like the water wars of 2027 in California. If the writing industry survives and there's still enough trees left to print books, in 5 years you'll get my fiction book. And if not, you can get it on your Kindle Paperwhite. I'm kidding. We're gonna have to start editing out the Kindle stuff. We can't get the free submissions.
Sorry, Kindle.
Sorry.
This is a direct thing. Please sponsor us.
Please sponsor us. When
just
the
released a
trees
new
are running out soon, and we're all gonna need a Kindle to read my new book that comes out in 5 years.
I don't want to have to keep wearing blue light glasses.
Yeah.
But what do you
Look at what I
think,
say.
John? Like John writes poetry. Like John's a poet. So what do you think? Poetry is confrontation of the self, almost.
I think I
You put that in such a better way than I said it. Yeah.
I have to agree with everything you said. Like, I've never really thought about it that way, but I think implicitly I have. I've just never found the words to say. But I think it's interesting how you said, like, fiction, you have to be a good liar to write fiction. And I was telling this to another poet friend of mine who I wrote a poem once, and it was in a workshop, and I had this scene in the poem where a carnival, a pure side carnival, collapses into the sea. And he came up to me, he's like, "Oh my God, that really happened to you?" I'm like, "No, it didn't happen to me." And he seems shocked. He's like, "What do you mean it didn't happen to you? You wrote it in your poetry." I'm like, "I lie in my poetry all the time." And it seemed like a concept that I didn't realize like a lot of other poets don't really do. Because I think for a lot of poets, it's like poetry is truth and ambiguity, but it's still their truth. It's their truth of emotion. But I think for me, I have a tendency to lie in my own poetry, to sort of lie to myself to get to the truth in some weird, convoluted way, where I have to like lie to myself to create this scenario, to find the truth. That why did I lie to myself to do that? So I think it's very fascinating how you said like fiction writers need to be good at liars. I think poets need to be good at lying too, and to some degree, I think they need to be truthful to themselves as well.
Do you guys stick with the whole like thing, like write what you know? Is that something you think about, like write what you know? Because it sounds like, John, like you kind of deviate a little bit away from that, like trying to figure out what you know through things that you don't. It's like, what's your process of that? If you think, Nadaa, that like poetry is truth, poetry is something that is like, I guess, not as adorned as fiction.
Yeah. Actually, I think this is the thing. I love to contradict myself, but I think you do also have to be a liar to be a poet, because I'm not saying I'm not a liar, but I guess I would say the lying is a different. I think it's not as an intense amount of lying, right? Like again, in poetry, it's like what I think in poetry too. It's like what's a lie and what's a metaphor. Yeah. Because they're like, okay, like you didn't actually fall off a pier. I'm like, you ever heard of a metaphor? Like I metaphorically fell off the pier of my own longing and whatever. Yeah. If this is a poem, right?
It's figurative language,
It's figurative language, guys.
But yeah,
because you're not creating a whole world. But I do agree. I'm taking the poetry as, like confrontation of self. I'm trademarking that, sorry. I'm stealing
that's
that.
Yours.
But I think that like, I guess with poetry and creating a story, I would say that I'm not always out here like telling my extreme truths in poetry. Like they're in there. Like what you said, I think a lot of it is obfuscating it. Like I feel like I use poetry as a mirror. So if you like get a prism and you reflect the light a bunch of times and like take my poems and then write them like ink on the wall and then like look at it at like 10 a.m. on a Monday, October 5th, and maybe the truth will come out somewhere. Like the words will illuminate. It's like a stupid little puzzle. I think that in poetry, in a way, like it's not even necessarily, I guess I would say in a way I tell the lie, because poetry, I think it's like the truth is in there, but it's under metaphor. And I don't necessarily see that as a lie, but rather as like a way to explain it. Because I think poetry is always with poetry, you're trying to convey things not straightforwardly. Maybe some people write straightforward poems. Maybe I'm over here talking about stereotypical poems. Whenever I'm writing a poem, it's like with fiction, I would say if I wanted to like write a story about, like walking down the road. Like, I'm going to mention a road in there. I can go write an entire poem about walking down the road, and I'm not going to mention a road. I'm not going to mention a lane. I'm not going to mention footsteps. There's even going to be a mention of a body or a person or motion. But you're going to be like, oh, this is about walking down the road. Like, that in a way is, like, sort of this obfuscation, this lying. And in fiction, you're talking about walking down a road, but there's no road. You never walk down it. The characters aren't real, and you're in a world you constructed. I think in the way that's what I'm sort of saying, it's like a lie, I guess. Unless you write autofiction, which is like where you like where you don't want to do creative nonfiction or fiction, so you just do like a middle ground. Autofiction writers, don't come at me for that, but that's the real non-committal genre. But I think at least with my process with poetry, because I guess I feel like I'm not super answering the question, but
no, I like it. You're talking about like refraction almost. Like,
yeah,
it's like not the truth, but it's refracted in the way where you would have to look at a different direction.
Yeah.
Kind of to swerve it, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess, exactly. I think that poems are, I don't want to say shattered. I think if anything, it's more like a prism where you like look through and every angle it changes. I think poems are more like a prism, like a light prism. Something, or like even a kaleidoscope. Like you're looking through it, there's that image, but everybody's only seeing a different piece and they're putting it together in a different way to create a whole. And so that's like sort of exactly what you said, like poetry is refraction. I think poetry is sort of like more of this abstract thing that it's a little bit separate from fiction. There's like gaps, there's spaces, there's these cognitive leaps and jumps that people have to make in a way. And I think that poetry is more like a set of experiences. I really like Ursula Le Guin. She has like an essay where she talks about like fiction, but I apply it all the time to poetry, and she's like, you know, she was like, it's literally on her blog. If you guys look up Ursula Le Guin's old blog, it's like archived somewhere. We on Archive of Her Own, and it's called like A Message About Messages. And she's like, I'm so fucking tired of people asking me what the message of my story is. Like, why does there have to be a message? This is for fiction, but it still applies. She's like, why does there have to be a message? Sometimes a story can just be a house that you're coming through, right? And she talks a lot in this essay about like writing fiction and writing a book as a house. Like, there's not necessarily a message or a passage. The reader just comes in, they open the front door, they look at the rooms, they look at what they find alluring, walk through and leave, and it's an experience. And they've left being changed or not changed, but at least they experienced the house. Yeah. And she's like, I don't want people to ask me. Yeah. I feel like it's like I make all my undergrads read it, actually, in my workshop class, if anyone took my workshop class. But who's listening to this, I doubt it. But it's like such a good perception of writing in so many ways. And she also talks about writing itself as like writing and reading as like an action, right? She's like, it's like dancing, it's like singing. Like a story can be like a run or a walk or a jog. You could be cartwheeling through it. And when it comes to poetry, I sort of try and take it like that. Like a poem is an experience. You wander in, you read it, you feel like, you look at the lines, and you like sort of leave. You don't necessarily have to take anything with you or not take anything with you, but you're changed just by the experience of having walked through it, right?
Yeah.
And seen it. And I think I try to like apply that to my poetry, because poetry is so abstract, but it's just sort of more of like a feeling. I also love Linda Berry, who writes a book called Making Comics, and she writes about making comics and arts and drawing, which I think is a little bit completely different from poetry, but I see it as the same thing. And she talks a lot about how when kids first learn to draw, they think of writing as drawing. So it's like they draw their names, they don't write their names. And it's only as like we go to school and we learn how to write that we like create the separation between writing and drawing. And I think of poetry almost as that in between, where it's like we're using words as images and pictures almost as we were as a kid, because like the letters, I think she says like the letters of our name weren't just letters, they were images, right?
I really like that.
And that is sort of how I see poetry, like maybe in comparison to fiction. It's like these set of still images and we're almost drawing with them and putting them in order.
That's so good.
That's so applicable to John. I think I've seen John really is interested in like physical space on the page and stuff like that. You guys should talk more.
Okay.
Should talk.
If we're going to get on 2010 years, poetry as design, I think that poetry is also such a huge design element as fiction. Yeah. Like, I think people also, if we're going to talk about the editing side, like, okay, there's a lot going into publishing of a book. And if you're publishing a fiction book and you're a fiction writer, I feel like if I'm going to say, oh, fiction writing isn't about design, you're going to be like, okay, but what about all the hours we spent picking out the font and the page sizes for my book? And I'm like, I'm sorry. But a lot of times in fiction, like, page sizes and counts and paragraph formats, that does matter for keeping the reader engaged, but like the design is in a practical format. I think poetry as design is sort of like in a complete different world, because the physical space on the page informs the poem. Depending on the font, if you use bold, if you use italics, if you use a different color, if you use a different size font, if you move one word 2 inches, it completely changes how a poem is experienced on the page, because there's only so many words you put into order. And like poetry itself, if you look at it, it's all completely about design and art. There's so many things you could do. This is why I need like 3 MFAs, right, on like different subjects. But I think that's like very true, and it's true of poetry in a way that's not true of other mediums, and also that's why like so many hybrid poetry works are so interesting in like the world of hybrid and experimental poetry, because you could take one poem that's like 5 lines and just like write it like a traditional poem, throw it into like, you know, make it some couplets with a final ending single line, and you know, everyone's like beautiful. But then you could take that same poem, chop it up over 2 pages, repeat the words, like add some like reverb, some like design elements, and it'll be a completely different poem, right? You can't really necessarily do that as much with other elements or like other like mediums. I think that's why poetry is so interesting. Poetry is in itself, it's like design, it's an art form. It's more of a mix of the two than everything. Like sometimes I just feel like poetry is also just like a really good it's a good gateway into doing other formats. Yeah. There's a lot of poets I know who actually went and did comic books, surprisingly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Adrian Medichka, go get his comic book that he wrote about Jack Johnson, the boxer.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that. I think poetry is like it's very multifaceted. It borrows from everything, and it is an art form that it's like this. It's like the heart of everything. You know, it's the heart of like design, the heart of fiction, nonfiction. It's truth. It's lies. It's everything. It's everything, and yet it's fascinating that it can be everything, and yet rely on so little words to say everything. You know, it's really a fascinating art. So if any of you out there who say poetry is boring, it's not. It's really cool. Write poetry, and you might find yourself becoming a poet.
Yeah. We can talk about poetry with you, Nadaa, for like 18,000 hours.
And I will never shut up, sorry. No. Also, if you're not a poetry supremacist, don't give us any comments. Poetry supremacy only for this week, sorry.
No. I think I love it when people just start talking about their passions. I love, that's the reason why we started this podcast, because we just love hearing about it. And I love, the raw, just thought process of talking about it. Because I feel like talking about it is usually in the setting of a class, for me at least, for an undergrad at least. That's the reason why we, started inviting people onto here, because just so much that we don't know. And then people are so passionate about writing. People should experience this. Raw, Nadaa. That's what you're giving us.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, but to respect your time, because I know you have to leave. We're on a time crunch, guys. We like to ask you fun questions at the end of our podcast. So these are, by the way, thank you, Melissa, for sending in questions. She's here with us in spirit. See, I have 2 questions I want to ask you. Which one do you want to ask, John? I don't want to take up your time too much.
You can ask both, and then I will actually try and give a concise answer for once in my life. We'll see if that happens.
Okay. We'll ask both rapid fire, and then you can decide which one you want to answer first.
First, what's your favorite book to movie adaptation? And then what fictional universe would you like to live in? Not fictional, it could be a poem you would like to live in. What literary world would you like to live in?
Okay, so actually this is for book to movie adaptation. I don't think I have an answer because I haven't read that many books that were turned to movies. Okay. I feel like I actually just avoid it because I'm what if it's ruined?
That's okay. That's so valid.
That's fair, yeah.
Okay, good. Because I'm trying to think. I know
Melissa's
I have not read Interview with the Vampire, but if I read Interview with the Vampire, maybe it would be it because I'm just obsessed with it. I'm just gonna plug Interview with the Vampire has I need to get. All these brands, you need to start funding me. But Interview with the Vampire, I have to start season 2. All I'm gonna say is it's fantastic. So I'm just gonna assume if I read the book, I would like the adaptation. And I'm afraid to read the book because the show is so good. So that's the one time I'm ever gonna do that.
That's so valid.
So we're just gonna pretend I read Interview with the Vampire. That's gonna be my fake answer. And if I had to live in a fictional world, I think this is so funny because it can be does it have to be a book or can it be a TV show?
Any fictional world. I don't even know my answer. I asked them and I don't have an answer.
Yeah. I guess it's very difficult to have an answer. I feel off the top of my head immediately was Avatar: The Last Airbender.
That's such a good answer. I was thinking about that too.
Simply just because I'm I want to no. I would not be the Avatar. That'd be too much power. I can barely boil a pot of water.
Would you want to be a bender though? Or would you just want to be Cabbage Man?
Cabbage Man just has to live with the inequalities. He has to live with the randomness of life. I feel I became a writer to cope with the random violence of life. So if I was Cabbage Man, I would have to go become a hermit. I'd have to become a philosopher. I couldn't do it.
That's such a
good
answer.
I'd have to be a bender.
What bender though?
This is the thing. I'm always do I want to be a water bender? Or do I want to be an earth bender? Because water, healing, I'm very clumsy. That would be very useful.
Yeah.
That would be very useful. But also earthbending, like, to be honest, jewelry is expensive. We saw Toph could metal bang. Like, she, like, could metal bend. I feel like we're living in a capitalist universe. I feel like as being an earthbender,
Like, earthbender is where it's at.
Earthbender is where it's at. Like, I could just, like, go out in the woods, practice some metal bending,
But
like,
if
extract
you're
some silver
water-
ore.
But if you're water, you could be, like, blood bending. I think that's the craziest thing.
I don't think I need the power to be a dictator. I think I'd, like,
Lonnie
go too
just went
far.
straight for the violence.
Okay,
Yeah,
like,
like,
straight for the weaponry.
that was my favorite episode. I remember being a kid being like, this is the scariest episode.
I'm like, okay, actually, justice for the bloodbender.
That's true.
If we're gonna, like, be, because I'm a poet, so I feel like I'm like, I don't want to be like, oh, I have to, like, root for the villains, because majority of the times I don't. But, like, you know, I see where she was coming from.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah.
Don't bloodbend people, but she had to get out of jail. She had to do what she had to do.
She was living in an era that was not like theirs, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Just don't go crazy, like, and let it get to you. But, like, you know,
I guess-
bloodbend a little
You
yeah.
bit
can use
to
it for like good things too. You can like take blood. and,
That's
like, if
exactly
you need
what
to
I was
donate
thinking
blood.
about, like a medical thing.
Medical
You know,
thing.
it's just like, you need a pint, just like pull it out.
Okay, I'm about to like go log into fanfiction.net. So you guys actually gonna have me writing fiction, not real fiction, but writing some fanfiction. You know, like after Last
Fanfiction
Airbender
is
2024.
real fiction.
Yeah, it's real fiction. Actually, honestly, it is. It is. I'm gonna be like modern adaptations to bending abilities because it's like okay. You know, people get like $50 for like donating plasma. How much money would you get as being someone who just extracts someone's plasma like that,
Exactly.
so they don't have to sit there for a
Like,
couple hours?
Yeah, I could never if you were a waterbender.
You're afraid of needles? Don't worry, I'll blood bend it out of you.
Yeah.
You're totally fine.
You'd have to do it during like the full moon, isn't that the whole gist?
Oh,
You'd
you're
have to wait till like the full
right.
moon.
But if you're a really strong bender, you should be able to blood bend without the full moon.
And that's Nadaa.
But what we're saying is like, listen, genetic modifications, like they have to like benders should be like because. If you're looking at Legend of Korra, like everybody suddenly was able to metal bend. Toph figured out metal bending. Nobody had metal bended for years, and then all her ancestors, all the Beifongs, were like, yeah, now we can metal bend.
That's
And
true.
also, guess what? Wait, now we can also lava bend. What was his? I don't know if you guys saw
Yeah.
Legend of Korra, whatever
Yeah.
his name was. Sorry, but he learned how to lava bend. So I'm like, if we're thinking about like
That's-
bending getting better over time, people can probably blood bend like that now.
That's true, like evolution. That's such a good answer. Oh my gosh, now I want to have like a good answer too. I was gonna say like, I was thinking of like, what short story have I read? And I was thinking of that, I forgot, it was like, I don't know who wrote it. I was thinking of dystopias. And I was like, I would like to see, it was about that one short story of like that room that like turned into like the African safari and like the kids end up like putting like lions on their parents. That sounds so
Is it
gruesome.
Narnia? No.
It's like a short story, and I was just like, that sounds like a movie. Like, I would like to watch it. That's
But you
not
would
a
want to
good
experience
answer.
it?
Not
or no?
experience it. I was just thinking about,
That could be fun.
No, that's a bad answer compared to airbending. What's your answer, John?
I was gonna say Last Airbender.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, you
just
guys
'cause,
No,
like,
I'm actually just basic.
That was
No,
just
that's
such an
not
informative show. It was
basic,
so
yeah.
unique and like it sucked to be in the world and not be a bender. I'll admit, like I'd want to be a
That's
bender.
true.
I don't
You'd
think
be like, dang
So we
it.
need actually like another podcast episode to talk about my opinions of after Last Airbender, benders
March.
versus non-benders. You know, March. Honestly, and I need like one. I could do one past podcast after Last Airbender, but I could probably do like 3 episodes on how much hate I have for Legend of Korra. I know. Sorry for the Legend of Korra fans.
Sorry, guys. I agree.
Yeah, it's not their fault. Whatever, they didn't renew. They didn't like the writer was gone. It was hard for them to write a good arc. Still, Legend of Korra disappointment.
Yeah.
Why would you make Toph Beifong start a police academy after all the
agree.
crimes she did?
I agree.
I was just like,
that's
who
everyone in that
wrote
show is a
this?
bad parent.
Yeah.
Everyone. in the
No,
gang
but,
is a
like,
bad parent.
I get mad too because I think it's such a cool world. Steampunk magic. Like, are you kidding me? That's so cool. And then I watched it and I was just like, guys, this is such a good premise. I didn't read the comic books though. Maybe I'm fake. I didn't read the comic
Neither have
books.
I.
Comic books
yeah.
are good.
Yeah, I
They
heard the
definitely
comic books
make
are
a
really good.
really short comic, but I thought season 3 had potential.
I thought it did
I
too.
thought it was.
I just never really finished it. I watched every single episode of Avatar as it was like coming out as a child because how dedicated I was. Like, I wanted Jet to have like a redemption arc and stuff like that in that one episode so badly. Never worked out.
But Zuko gets a redemption arc.
That's true.
But-
Zuko's-
One of the greatest redemption arcs.
No, for real.
Yeah, I'm like,
he gets
but
hair.
but Jet couldn't get
That's his
like
redemption arc.
Jet got traumatized too. He can't get like a redemption arc.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I guess like maybe because Jet didn't get like exiled from his family to like wander the earth. I
No,
don't know.
yeah.
Okay, we have some left time, but maybe you guys can do like a fictional adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'll write some poems, some Avatar: The Last Airbender poems.
Yeah,
It's gonna be like a collection of it, like like an anthology of just like we love Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Actually, if you like sci-fi poetry, you guys should check out. There's like the Riesling Award, and they do a bunch of like they take all their favorite like sci-fi and supernatural pieces and poems and have an anthology of it. So if anyone out there wants to get like into science fiction or supernatural and find lit magazines who do it, just go look at the Riesling Awards website. They have like a list of every like supernatural sci-fi lit mag out there for people like speculative fiction. So if you have like the poetry version of Avatar: The Last Airbender brewing in your head, that's where to go.
That's so awesome.
Nice.
Wait, really quick. So at the end of our show, we like to do shout-outs. Shout out anything. Like shout out Trader Joe's like green tea mints. Like anything you want.
What do people usually shout out? Now I'm gonna overthink this.
Some people do their parents. Some people do like, I don't know, like LaCroix. Some people do like, oh, shout out that one guy who like almost hit me on the way here.
All like my brand endorsements suddenly have like fallen out of my head. I guess I would say
shout out Kindle.
Shout out to Gmail for sending me a reminder that I hadn't responded to this email in like 2 months, and I was like, oh shit, let me respond. Shout out to Southwest Airlines. Please don't kill me today on my flight. I hope my flight
you can do it.
Well. Yeah.
No, Southwest.
You can do it Southwest.
Exactly, you can do Southwest. Shout out to Amtrak for getting people to Davis and back.
Thank you, Amtrak.
Actually, I realized what my shout really should be Subaru. Shout out to Subaru for getting me here and for not having my car break down. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love Nadaa so much with a burning passion. She was like the one tea I really wanted to be friends with, and I would just like stare at her beautiful backpack all the time. It was so cute.
All other TAs.
I love that backpack.
Get a cool bag. Okay, shout out Doc Martens. So, if you guys would like to shop this podcast episode, thank you. If you'd like to shop this podcast episode, it is the cherry vegan leather Doc Martens backpack. They actually discontinued it, so you won't even be able to get it. The swag is that deep that it is not an accessible item. Now. Yeah, it's novelty. But yeah, Doc Martens buckle red cherry leather buckle backpack.
Every outfit that I wore was so cute. Okay.
All right.
Okay. How do we do our outro?
We just say, and remember everyone.
Okay, so we do an outro together. So we go, and remember everyone, stay bookish. Should I clap?
No,
Are we going to cut that out?
No, I'll leave it in.
Okay. Okay, ready guys? And remember everyone, stay bookish. Bye!